I did a post on my Facebook talking about the launch of this new version of a show called Downton Abbey. I shared the contradiction of how that show essentially whitewashes all the class contradictions. Essentially, the big elephant in that room is the fact that the servants who are portrayed in there are made to appear that they're all, friends with the royalty and everything works out. Meanwhile, the show has won many, many awards on its historical accuracy and how well they pay attention to detail. So I did that post, and you can go look at it, and there's some very interesting dialogue there. A few people said, hey, very few, most people got it. A few people said, hey, this is just a show, it's just entertainment. So that's why the title that I did of this is Downton Abbey, not just a show, but it's royal and deliberate propaganda. And that's what we want to discuss. And some of you may know I've lived out in Hollywood. I've had my relationships there. And most of the people there who want to be celebrities have very little talent. And not to say that there are not some very extraordinary talented people, but they're few and far between. But by and large, the strata people live out there, and you can do your own investigation beyond my personal experience, essentially have golden handcuffs. Now, one of the things that needs to be understood is any show or movie that makes it to mainstream doesn't get there because it's just a good show, okay, or it just has talented people. It gets there because they have to execute on one very powerful part, which is distribution. So there are a lot of talented people out there. There are a lot of people who make great movies, great songs, great art. But you notice that there's this whole body of stuff that's out there, and then there's a very subset, a very, very small, razor thin set of stuff that actually gets distributed. And this distribution needs to be understood, or people are naive. When Downton Abbey gets out there, it didn't just get out there because it has some very good writers and very good actors, but that's not the reason. It got out there because of distribution. Several years ago, I did a movie that was produced by Pierce Brosnan. His wife directed it, and I was the main scientist in that movie, which won many, many awards. It was really on exposing GMOs and Monsanto. And Pierce Brosnan he sort of put himself out there because he produced it. And even with his name brand equity as one of the best James Bonds, it got zero distribution, even though it won all the awards. Great film, okay? And you can find it out there. It's called Poisoning Paradise. But the point is that great movies, great art, great documentaries don't just get out there. They get out there if the distribution occurs. Well, you have people like Weinstein, who used to control this kind of distribution. And there's a very finite set of people who control this distribution, and things don't get distributed unless they serve the purpose of those in power. So art serves political reasons, and you have to appreciate that. It's not just great art gets out there. You have to be part of the clique. It's very, very rare that stuff gets out there because it just happened to make it through. So Downton Abbey, the point I'm making is, for it to get out there, for it to get all this popularity, etc., is because some people wanted it out there. And those some people are not you or I. They're people with incredible amount of wealth and power, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that the premiere just took place, I think, this past week. It's funny because I looked at some of the people out there, and you can see, I'll show you pictures of this. Most of the people who are part of the premiere, who went to the party and the after party, many of these people are who think they're the most awoken people, right? They're the ones who are talking about, quote unquote, Black Lives Matter, or they're talking about, the Me Too movement, and et cetera, or how much they're against child trafficking, et cetera. Let me show you sort of the scene. So this was the Downton Abbey premiere, and you can see sort of the shindig here of people all getting dressed up. It looks literally like out of the 20s. Same time, that very similar to what we're living now. A lot of class contradictions, people having serious economic issues, but then you have one branch of the elites who are out there getting dressed up like this and attempting to make everyone, quote unquote, feel good. And so this was the actors and the actresses, and you can see there was an event, and then there's big after party after this. Again, many of these people, knowingly, these are very political people, who are partying out there, having a grand time on a piece of culture, quote unquote, art that they are creating. All of these people that they know it's about royalty, it's about promoting royalty. They've read the script, and they know that this script, and anyone who actually sees it has any historical context, knows knows that the script has nothing to do with reality. Yet, as you'll see as I share this, all these people partying out there who claim that they're for the masses and want to work for you and I, etc., are part of a money-making machine, this Downton Abbey, which actually completely ameliorates any of the real big elephant is how they are completely inaccurate about the way servants were actually treated. Now, to those of you, small minority, who think this is just a show, let me just point out that this show's won a lot of awards, and one of the reasons it won a lot of awards is because they said how historically accurate it was. Okay, and let me show you that. And this is just some of those things. So here's an article that came out. It says in Citizen Times, it says Downton Abbey, meet who keeps Downton Abbey historically accurate. And it's talking to the guy, apparently, this guy Darren Popper, who's the chief curator, and he was hired to actually keep this very accurate. And he's so proud of himself, how accurate that he keeps the show. He says, he makes sure, people, he goes, the documentaries from Alistair Bruce, the historical advisor for show. You could also call him the shoulder police. Part of his duties, he describes, is to watch the actors and make sure they keep their backs straight and tall. And he says, all the time I watch to make sure actors and actresses don't do modern things like slouch. He said later, nothing that we all spend so much time bent over computers and phones that we slouch so much more than these characters would in the 20th century. I keep an eye on their demeanor. Okay. And then he goes on to say, he also makes suggestions about the set and the movements of characters. For instance, he will note that a servant at an estate in that era would not exit the home through the door noted in the script. In the new season, Bruce Joke said he was unpopular after he was particularly stubborn about a blanket. Okay. So anyway, this article's about this guy, how he makes sure that the servants, and their interaction with the other characters are done to historical accuracy. Let me show you another one. And this is another one, an article that came out in the list, which talks about why Downton Abbey producers didn't allow costumes to be washed during filming. And it's about how they try to maintain accuracy. And it says, aside from the talent cast of brilliant writing, Downton Abbey has received praise for its historically accurate period costume. Okay, the costumes are so popular, in fact, that they ended up being celebrated in an exhibition per the Downton exhibition official. And it says, according to Gentleman's Gazette, the show worked with 4 costume designers through the 6 series to oversee historical accuracy. Anna Robbins is cited most often when talked about the clothing Downton Abbey. And it goes here to say, to maintain the authenticity of certain vintage costumes, they were rarely washed. Okay? Point being that this show claims that they hired experts to make sure the servants were interacting right, that the clothes were accurate, etc. And you have this award-winning show, which gets a lot of plays, made a lot of money, and with this movie coming out. And again, understand that this would not occur without distribution. So it's absolute naivete to think that these movies and shows just make it on their own. They make it because there's a lot of money behind it and there's an agenda behind it. Okay? My significant other watches the show all the time. And I actually got interested in this because I saw this event take place. And I know some of the foolish people go to these events. And what I then saw at the same time as I was seeing this take place was I saw a book that came out on the same occasion of the show. And I'm going to share with you that book. Okay? That book was this book that came out, and let me bring it here. And the review was What Downton Abbey Doesn't Show You, The Dark Side of Life as a Servant in Britain's Mansions. The book, Not in Front of the Servants, as the title of the book, reveals what it was really like to be a maid in the UK back-breaking work, No Free Time and Cruel Masters. Now, what the book talks about is there was a guy by the name of Frank Victor Dawes, okay? And Frank Victor Dawes was a British journalist in 1872. He published an ad in the Daily Telegraph 1972, and he asked people who had worked as servants to send him letters recounting their experiences in these British households. And he got lots and lots of letters, people writing, and one of them was this person, Harriet Brown, who wrote, I am up at 5:30 and 6 every morning and do not go to bed till nearly 12 at night, and I feel so tired sometimes I'm obliged to have a good cry. And he shares in this book, which he launched at the same time as people were partying out there, what the real reality was. And for example, he talks about in the book, he goes, this image is far from the experience of Elizabeth Simpson, born in 1850 1953, who also began working as a maid at the age of 10, okay, child labor, in a mansion in the country of Yorkshire. As her granddaughter told Dawes, she had to get up at 4 a.m., so it's a 10-year-old girl, to scrub the stone floors of the dairy with cold water, churn butter until her arms ached. At those early hours, she worked by the light of a single candle, which she pushed ahead of her as she moved across the stone flags on her knees. She was kept working all day. Under the rules of the mansion, which were strictly enforced, she was never to be seen by any of the family. If by some mischance they happened to meet, she was not to talk to them, by courtesy and disappear as quickly as possible. Okay, so Dawes really talks about what took place, and he apparently got 700 different letters in a space of months of people really sharing what it was really like to be in a Downton Abbey type environment. He also talks about the fact that, women were essentially completely abused in these environments. The religious order of the time tried to say how both servant and master were fed the idea that their position in life responded to divine order. So essentially, they used religion or the Bible to try to say that it was okay to be screwed over and be a slave. But one of the most important things that Dawes found was, how these servant people were treated, right? He goes, in terms of how they were mistreated by the masters. He goes, as for the servants and women of lower classes, they all fornicated in secret and were proud to have a gentleman to cover them. That was the opinion of men of my lifestyle and my age, recounts a Victorian gentleman in his memoirs, which he published. If, as happened all too often, a servant girl became pregnant by one of the family, the blame was squarely based on her shoulders, not his, writes Dawes. Often these women were fired without reference, which left her for the alternative of the workhouse or prostitution. So anyway, as these actors and actresses are partying away, which was last week, in New York and Britain at this launch, all of the quote unquote Me Too, they have forgotten the elephant in the room about the actual treatment of women, these women servants. And so why is this being done? So you have to ask, why is this being done? So how does a film like this make it? Go back to follow the money and follow the political agenda. A movie like this does not make it unless it has a political agenda, okay? If it serves money making and a political agenda, it's a grand slam.